Hey, just wanted to say, quick disclaimer, we are not theologians, pastors, religious teachers, or in any way an authority of the Bible. Just average Christians having a great time talking about the Bible with our friends. Potluck was created to encourage food for thought and to help open up a conversation about major and minor topics from the Bible. We strongly encourage all audience members to conduct their own research as statements presented are largely opinion-based as well as biblically backed. Us here at Potluck wish you a great day and please, come enjoy the potluck.
Welcome to Potluck, the podcast where we bring our different dishes of conversation and perspective to the table. This podcast focuses on a casual conversation about God through personal stories and experiences. We hope that these conversations help in understanding the Bible, God, and each other. We're glad that you've decided to join our conversation. Hey guys! No, I can't start that. Oh my god, that was so bad. But welcome back to our podcast. Basically, we kind of came up with our name. We're trying to figure out how to describe the title of our name. Like, how would you describe it? Like,
I don't really know.
It's a tasty one.
Oh wow! Oh, you're hilarious, Delano. Wow, comedian. Anyone else got some puns to bring in to clue everyone into what it is?
we're dishing out our opinions.
Opinions.
Mhm.
My God. Oh,
I think it's quite
We're bringing the bread to the table.
We're serving facts.
We're
We're serving facts.
Yeah, so basically our name is Potluck. Potluck
Yay.
podcast. And this took a long time to figure out. Like, yeah, but basically it's Potluck the podcast because there's too many podcasts named Potluck. But if it's Potluck, comma, the podcast, that makes us different.
Yes. So welcome to Potluck, comma,
The
the
podcast.
The podcast.
Yeah. So that's super exciting. We spent like a good 2 hours deciding like our name, and then another 3 just deciding on the music, like the music genre of.
There's music?
Yeah, we're the music. Vincent wasn't here last time. So that actually brings us into like introducing everyone who's here. So today we're here with, I'm going to start from this side and then go that way. We're here with Briley. She wasn't here last time. Say hi.
Oh, hi. I
That's
waved, but that's not okay.
So Briley, say something interesting about yourself.
Ooh, okay. Literally anything. I don't know.
He's a horse girl.
Wow.
No,
A horse
oh my
girl. Yeah,
No,
Darcy, you did it, not me. You said it, not me.
Literally the worst situation ever. Am not.
Okay, that's good enough. So Kirby.
And we're
Skip.
done with you. Okay.
Skip.
Kirby, say hi.
Bonjour et bienvenue.
Dude, you're doing it in a different language every time.
I'm going to do
Till
it
he
in
runs
a
out of
different
language.
language every time.
I actually really appreciate that. Please do that.
You're welcome.
Say something interesting about yourself.
I'm 22 years old and I live at home with my parents.
What's interesting about that? That's
I'm sad about that.
I'm gonna say Kirby's interesting thing is that he likes geography.
That is interesting.
Yeah, that works.
I like me some maps.
Okay, Darcy, say hi.
Hi.
What's something interesting about yourself other than the fact that you're an artist?
Like outside of like your main thing, what else do you do?
What's interesting about me, Delano?
Oh, dang it.
I don't know. I was honestly trying to think about this.
She has a very large collection of pins,
Oh,
like writing pins.
oh,
There you
pen.
go.
I thought you said pins, not
Yeah.
pens.
That has to do with me being an artist. I feel like that's a given.
Yeah.
I have a large collection of rocks.
Oh,
Ooh, rocks.
That's-
Dark chocolate.
That's
Darcy,
why.
the rock collector. Okay,
Yeah.
now Delano, say hi.
Hello, I'm Delano. And an interesting fact can be that I'm going to be making the music for the podcast.
Hey, yeah.
We clap to that. We just say, "Yay!" What's going on? Oh, yeah, yeah. All right, yeah.
Hopefully,
All
that
right,
didn't-
Vincent. He also was. Vincent also was not with us this time, the last time. But say hi.
Ciao tutti, my name is Vincent Dan, and I love to study languages. I'm a recent college graduate, and I love football.
Hey, that was really great. And when he says
Someone's
football, he
professional.
means soccer.
Yeah.
Yeah, like football.
He's with me.
So anything that's been on your guys' mind, anything that like
Well,
The Bible. Let's talk.
something that's been appearing frequently in my life is wisdom. And recently I started like doing daily devotions and stuff. And for that, I started reading Proverbs without realizing that it was a book purely on wisdom. And it's I didn't necessarily go into it thinking it was realizing it about wisdom.
I see his face.
I know.
I call.
I'm a heathen. But yeah, no, so I've been reading that, and it's been correlating with just a lot of things in my life day to day, outside of my Bible studies about wisdom, and I think it's just interesting topic to talk about. Like, what does wisdom mean to you, and what does it mean in a biblical context to you?
that's really good. What does wisdom mean to me? I mean, when I think of wisdom in the Bible, I just my brain straight goes to like Solomon, like,
Mhm.
and then like the story with like him threatening to cut a baby in half.
Mhm.
Okay, wow. Okay, a very aggressive thought about wisdom when the first thought. That's crazy.
But that's what I think about because he was like the wisest man on earth, right?
Yep.
Something like that.
It was
Well, my first
given
thought on
God's
wisdom is
wisdom
slicing
directly.
an infant in half.
I have a thought about it, which is it's not fully developed yet, but I'm noticing a little bit of a trend. When you think about wisdom, I think a trait that's closely tied to it is leadership. Solomon, for example, was a leader. He was a king, no?
Mhm.
Yeah. So him, well, Moses was more of like one of the kindest people. He regarded as the kindest people, I think, person to ever live. But in a sense, he was wise for the majority of his life, and also a leader. And other examples that I feel like even in life away from the Bible, um, it's a trait that is sort of attached to the individual when you talk about wisdom. For example, your parents or you need all the siblings. Um, Probably mostly because it comes from people who are older, but I don't know.
Mhm.
So far, is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, so like wisdom is somehow like tied in with like leadership.
Mhm.
Because you don't really see a lot of times with like a wise kid, even though it's possible, but like, yeah,
Well, I think
wisdom
like
comes with age.
I think young people definitely can be wise, but whenever I think of like a wise kid, I feel like maybe they're very smart, like they're very
Mature.
knowledgeable, they're very mature for their age, but still lacking wisdom because wisdom comes with experience. So if you're a kid, you don't have like much experience.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But then also, like we still like young people can still be wise. Like what's that verse that says
Out of
don't
the mouth of
something
babes.
because you are young, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young. So like you can still be wise and know what you're talking about as a young person. So how do we do that, like do we go after life experiences? Do we read the Bible like cover to cover? I mean, I guess one of the ways to get wisdom as a young person would definitely be to listen to the wisdom of the older people and what they tell you.
You're
Mhm.
always going to be younger than somebody, though. So the fact that you're young doesn't necessarily mean that you can be unwise. Yeah, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I would say is that so the commonality between wise people and leaders and stuff like that. I think that also has to do with like from from just the biblical stories. If you look at like David was directly led by God and he made a lot of mistakes, but he was also quite wise. And same for Solomon, directly led by God, Moses, all these leaders who would be considered wise were directly led by God. Like they talked to God. They I think that had a heavy aspect in their wisdom. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point because, like you said, they weren't perfect, and wisdom doesn't necessarily mean 100% perfect because wisdom, to a certain extent, comes from previous mistakes, just observing experiences and things like that. So, that's a good point. That's a good point. I really like that one.
I think it would be really cool to like circle back to like the question that Darcy asked, which was like, how can like we be wise as like young people? Like, how do you guys think that like we can like be wise? So like I think Delano started answering that by like being more connected with God in that way. But like what do you guys think like we can do to enhance our wisdom? I guess you could say.
I think this kind of ties in with the like what I said about experiences. Like not I'm not necessarily saying you have to like go try to have like all these experiences just for the sake of becoming wise, but like live life, like really live life, take chances, do things that are outside of your comfort zone, embrace life, and don't just stay in like this little bubble or like this little safe space, because you're not going to grow that way as well as you would if you were like truly embracing life, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. That term embracing life is like difficult because like the world tells us like, oh, live life, and that means like drink alcohol, like do all these like party. Yeah. Basically go crazy. So you're just saying like, so explain like more like what you mean by like living life. Like you said it's like experiencing people. So it's like, what do you mean by like not staying in your bubble?
Yeah, I would say like purposely putting yourself in places where you can hear different perspectives than your own, see different perspectives than your own.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's the only example that comes to mind right now. But
No, that makes sense because like I think all of us have actively seeked people in our lives. Like all of us are very different. Like in our like personal lives, like what we've experienced through our faith. And I feel like that really helps us all grow together in our faith because we've all experienced like different things.
Yeah. Also say do things that scare you. Like if you get a big idea and you're like scared of that idea because you're nervous or you don't know how it's going to work out, like go for it. Like that's an example of how to kind of like quote embrace life. Do the things that scare you, that are still like, not stupid, but yeah.
Like this podcast.
Yeah.
I know it was kind of daunting to kind of organize, Vanilla.
Yeah.
And piggybacking off of what Darcy was saying, I think I say this all the time, but one of the most important things that I've learned in life is to change my mindset to whatever situation I'm in, always look for something that I can learn from that and take away from that, whether it's good or bad. I feel like if you live your life always thinking this will benefit me in some way, I will make sure it benefits me in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Not as a selfish thing, but as a way to like, I can grow from this,
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of pulls into what Darcy was saying.
Right.
Wanted to add on to the bit of getting out of your comfort zone. I think usually when people assume getting out of your comfort zone is doing something crazy, right? Like you have to do something completely drastic which you do on an everyday basis. Honestly, you can just find the things you already like to do, but just get outside of your own circle. Like for example, let's be realistic, right? The Adventist bubble's real. The Adventist bubble is super real. People just stay within like cities and towns with a large Adventist church or a large amount of Adventist churches, and then end up doing things with only Adventist people. and then just don't interact with anyone else outside, right? That's the thing that a lot of people we personally even know are guilty of. They just kind of just stick with that status quo of, oh, the Adventist people will know what to do and I don't have to be tempted by anything, right? But like realistically, what does that do for you though? Like, what does that do for you? Especially when we're asked to like at least show the world and like preach the gospel, things like that, right? Like, again, I don't think we gotta be out here Bible in hand and going door to door like a Jehovah's Witness. Which again, if you want to do that's it's all you. But like that's not everyone's thing. You can just live your life, do what you enjoy, with just different people, and then people might ask you a couple questions, or people might want to figure out, hey, how come you seem different, or whatever. Like if you are living your life in the way that you think is in accordance, that will stick out for people to notice, right? So I think it's just you don't need to do a lot. You just need to like just get around different people, do something that you enjoy with different types of people, and see how that works out. Like especially if it comes to like me and athletics, go to like a rec league with a whole bunch of strangers and just do something, and then usually don't be the one who's outright saying the most vicious thing possible, which for me is hard because I'm just a super sarcastic person. But ideally it's like if you're being Christ-like in those public settings, people would then gravitate or ask you questions, and I've had plenty of questions with me being around a lot of Muslim people when I first came to college. It was just me being my Adventist self and kind of doing my own thing, and then people just asking questions about how come I don't do this, or how come I act like this, or how come I do this, and then questions pop up, conversations start, and then you start building relationships with people who aren't necessarily Christian or Adventist, and start bridging gaps and giving people knowledge, right? That's what I think.
Yeah,
I
that's
think I would like to add on that. Oh, Matt, go ahead. Go ahead.
Who didn't? Were you gonna say something to that?
Go for it.
Okay. Well, I was just gonna say that I think a big part of that, like, kind of going off of what everyone's kind of saying, is like a big part of wisdom is like knowing when to like shut up, like like to just listen. Like I feel like all the wise people I think of, like either thinking of the Bible, like wisdom in the Bible, or like just like wise people, like they're usually quiet. Like the wisest person is the quietest person in the room, because they're thinking, they're contemplating, they're drawing in ideas that maybe like if you're around a bunch of people that you don't necessarily are exactly alike, kind of like what Kirby was saying, you're just around different people and you're not like super loud and obnoxious about everything that you believe, like people will just naturally like be like, oh, like they'll be drawn to you if you just, I feel like that's and like in my head, that's what I think of when I think of wisdom.
I definitely see that.
Here's a question.
Just to
Oh, sorry, I forgot. No, Vincent, you tried to
My
talk.
bad.
Go for it.
You're good. Just very quickly, also to add on to that, because I feel like it's part as well. It's also about being open to understanding wisdom, because I feel like, yes, there's a lot of bad things around us, but there is a lot of wisdom to pick up, and being receptive is a major part of it as far as you growing and you understanding and taking in the wisdom. It's kind of like going to class. If you go to class but you don't hear anything, you're not receptive, you're going to leave without getting anything. You had the opportunity and you were around knowledge, but you didn't pick it up. So it's I think it's also about like being receptive to the wisdom around you. And like Bradley said, I like to say bark less and listen more. Another thing would be when you do find yourself in a low situation, a lot of people are like quick to, okay, I'm down, I need to get back up as soon as possible. Yes, but sometimes it's good to stay down for a minute, understand the darkness around you, and see why you got to where you are, and understand it, because you'll be down there again, but this time you'll be more prepared, and so I think that's growth, and that's an addition of wisdom that actions that we can take to grow our wisdom and I guess be receptive in that sense.
Just a recap of like everything. So yeah, like I feel like what Vincent just said really ties into what Briley was saying. But like so far we've said like wisdom means like leadership. Wisdom means like getting experience of some sort, knowing when to listen. I think that's like a really big one. Also like what you were saying, bark less and listen more. I love that. Like bark less and listen more, like just being receptive, because there's so many of us our age who are like constantly like they might be listening, they might have like leadership qualities, they might want to get experience, but they're not actually being receptive to like actually hearing out someone else's idea. Like, so the fact that you mentioned that, Vincent, was really big. But Darcy, you're about to say something?
Well, I was about to kind of change up the question a little bit. So are we like done with like putting the definition of wisdom down?
Pick it up, Darcy.
There you
Pick
go.
it up.
Okay, so the
Roll
question
the dice.
I was going to move into was, why do we need wisdom? Like, what do we use wisdom for? And I feel like people would see that question and be like, oh, that's obvious. But like, let's be specific. Like, what do we actually need wisdom for? How does it help us get through life?
Well, it can help us not make mistakes that the ones before us made. It can help us navigate through. I mean, this is the basic. I'm trying to start with the basic first. It can help us sort of avoid potholes in our path that we don't see. It's a help in a sense that it expands your vision. I guess perspective.
Perspective is a good word.
I was just thinking that like you could even well, specifically wisdom could be used to be able to like for foresight, right? A lot of times you kind of want to do like what satisfies you, right? So using wisdom can help you understand what decision will be better on for the future and help you make better decisions, right? So I think the idea of like needing wisdom is just to be able to better yourself further down the line, because someone who isn't wise will do what satisfies them in the moment, but someone who is wise will understand that, I'm willing to take this little hit now because it's not as bad as the benefits I'll have in the future. And that's someone who truly is wise will really use that for.
I think that God gives us wisdom to help other people as well. Like how Danila was saying, like wisdom is tied with leaders, and people, the reason that leaders exist is to help the others around them. And I feel like that's definitely one of the big reasons we need like wisdom and to be wise, is so that we can help bring up those around us.
Yeah. There's like so
Good
many
point.
stories, of leaders that like they may start out with great intentions, and they may have good intentions even the whole time. A lot of times that they don't, it turns into bad intentions. But we just hear so many stories of leaders just like inflicting so much pain and trauma on the people that follow them because they lost sight of whatever noble vision they started out with. Like I listened to a podcast recently with Delano about this pastor of a mega church.
Oh yeah.
And like the church started out really small. He just planted a church, and he was on fire. He wanted to do things differently than he had seen it done previously by many other church leaders. And as his church grew, he lost sight of what he was truly doing it for. His vision kind of got clouded by the power that he had. And that really affected so many people in a negative way. So I think definitely good point, Briley, about wisdom is really important in how we treat each other.
So far we've said like we need to like help us not to like, we need wisdom to help us not repeat like past mistakes. I feel like that's the biggest reason why we teach history classes. Like biggest reasons why we even have the Bible is because we see everyone else's past mistakes. And Vincent was mentioning that, and we see like, oh, David made that mistake. Okay, that's now giving us wisdom not to do that. And then I think the next thing Kirby was saying was like bettering yourself, just like needing wisdom to better ourselves. And then I think the last thing was just like bringing up leaders. And I feel like that all like correlates to like what wisdom is like the definition of what wisdom is why we need it almost. So like, why do we think, like, what is the difference between God wisdom and human wisdom? Like God.
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is that humans are naturally selfish creatures, and I think it's very difficult for us to make decisions without kind of putting ourselves in the equation. And I think wisdom that comes from God takes us out of the equation and takes into account the greater good instead of what would be best for us.
Yeah, and I guess like that question just leads to like my actual question that I wanted to ask was just like, how do we know when what we think is right is our own wisdom of what we think is right, and like what God like telling us is right? I feel like that's one of the hardest things to do. But like, what do you guys think is like, how do we decipher like our own wisdom versus God's wisdom?
Oh boy.
That's a good question.
I'm not qualified to answer that.
None of us are qualified to answer.
Yeah. I think every time I've had a question about like the Bible or what is right or wrong, I usually ask a family member, and my mom usually always says to like, if it's something that agrees with God, it'll like align with the Bible. So like always to like, if you feel like God's leading you this way, like, and if it doesn't go like against the Bible, then like, I don't know, I feel like I'm going in circles now, but does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
just constantly comparing it to the Bible and what God says there, and we're able to discern whether that it's like has godly intentions or not.
yeah, but that leads to a
Here's
good
also
point of like what if it aligns with the Bible, because some people think that, oh, God is telling me to kill someone. Hey, does that align with the Bible? Yes and no, because God has told people to kill people. So how, again, like, how do we
That's
like,
crazy. That's crazy. Real quick, when I think of this question, I think of it as in like you are in a, for example, you're in a decision, let's say to move somewhere or not. I don't know. It's some major decision in your life, and you're looking for wisdom. I feel like in that moment, time, like you can ask God for wisdom, you can ask those around you for wisdom, but sometimes the answer still isn't clear. And so for tough situations like that, I think one of the only way I look at it is time will tell, and I guess with time God will show you which way is right through making one of the options seem harder, or I don't know, making one of the pathways clear, I think.
Yeah. At a certain point, I think God leaves certain decisions up to the person because we do have free will, you know. Um, God's not gonna tell you always. Not God's not always gonna tell you this is what you have to do. This is what you have to do right now. At a certain point, there is an amount of trust that God will put into you, that you are listening to His word. You are following what He's asking you to do in the Bible. That He's trusting you, and your free will take action. And no matter what that action is, He will be there to back you up. So not necessarily that there's a right or wrong decision, like if you are moving places, right? Not necessarily that there's a right or wrong way to do it, but know that God will be there in whatever decision you make.
Like what college to go to or something.
Yeah, that's something that people pray to a lot about. And it's not necessarily like I don't think God's necessarily going to be like, oh, you're supposed to go to Southern. Like He might to some people, but to every single person, He's probably not going to answer that directly. So I think the important thing to know about that is if you read the Bible and you learn to trust God, then you will be led the right way or the best way.
I just remember like this one quote. I don't know who says it or anything, but it's like knowledge is knowing what to say, and like wisdom is knowing when to say it.
Yeah.
Like I just keep thinking about that this entire time of like what wisdom is, like why do we need it, and like how do we hear God's wisdom? Because it's like we might know like what college to go to based off of like what they provide for us. But like knowing when to do something, or like again like when to say something, I think that's the hardest thing, especially for me. and like my personal walk with God, because I think the hardest thing for me is like letting him control my life, because I feel like I know exactly what I'm gonna do, when I'm gonna do it, blah blah blah. And so like I feel like the college years has like really, like God's really forced me to like, hey girl, things are not always going to work out the way you want them to work out. And things come into your life and you're just going to not be able to like have everything in a row like you like it to be. But that doesn't mean that this is a problem, doesn't mean you like lose hope. So I feel like for me personally, the control aspect of like allowing God to work in my life, allowing him to talk to me is like the hardest thing personally.
And that kind of leads into the aspect of trust, which is a whole another topic as well, or faith, I guess.
Yeah.
I think faith and wisdom go hand in hand almost at some point, because if you're going to ask for wisdom from God, you have to have faith, you know.
Mhm.
Almost
To trust that wisdom.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna step back like a question though real quick.
Mhm.
And when you asked about like what is the difference between God's wisdom and like human wisdom, I'm taking a Christian philosophy class right now, and what was recently talked about is Paul, and when he went to Ephesus and he was talking to he was preaching to some of the people there. The people there he was preaching to specifically were the Stoics and the uh, Ephesians.
Ephesians.
Yeah, Ephesians, I guess. The people at Ephesus, they followed a certain like philosophy, and Paul had the wisdom to talk to these people and not be like overbearing and stuff, because these are level-headed people that were searching for wisdom in the natural world, right? And because that's what philosophy is, it's the search for like wisdom and knowledge. But philosophy from a Christian perspective is taking all the opportunities you were given in life, all the knowledge you were given in life, and applying that to your walk with God, your Christian walk. And Paul was hearing these people out. And Paul was talking to them in their like language and using their knowledge to um like validate what he was saying. And not that he changed every person there, but his approach to talking with these people about um just life in general and philosophy was wise, and it was guided by God, and it was guided by his experiences, and uh what the people were learning in the natural world as well, because Paul didn't necessarily disagree with 100% of what these people were saying, because he uh I don't remember exactly what verse where he said this, but there's a verse where he says that some 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 people are Christians but just don't have the law, and that's specifically potentially referring to like other philosophers, like non-Christian philosophers and stuff, people who were finding good finding the good things in nature that God had established and left us, but not attributing it to God. So that's where kind of the separation it is for me, and what human wisdom is compared to God's wisdom uh is the application of like faith, I guess. Yeah, faith in God, and faith that there is like something other than just the natural world.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I felt like I'm talking in circles now at this point.
No, that makes sense. You're just basically saying that like Paul found out that the like basic difference between like human wisdom and God's wisdom is the fact like faith and trust in God. As Christians, like believing in God already makes us somewhat different than everyone else. It makes us apart from the world. And like by believing in God, we have certain morals and ideals that already makes us somewhat rise, because he gives us like laws and things to think about in the Bible that helps us be wiser. Because without that, how would we would be the dumb Israelites in the wilderness not knowing what to do. Like law provides and gives us wisdom overall. But I have a question, just like a more like lighthearted question. It's just like, what is the wisest thing anyone's ever said to you?
Oh boy.
I mean, it doesn't have to be the wisest, but just like something wise that someone's told you that like really like kind of stood out to you.
For me, it's probably just the concept of realizing that there's two sides to every coin. I think probably the person that I most like clearly remember telling this to me is my dad, just kind of really reminding me and my sister that there's always multiple perspectives in every situation. Yeah, to kind of practice empathy and practice understanding when it comes to situations with other people.
Mm-hmm.
I got one.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was interning last year, one of my bosses, she helped explain to me because I had a minor breakdown at work because I was just messing a few things up, and it was to my thought that everyone knows what they're doing, especially in like a professional setting. Anyone who has a job, has been through college, knows everything about their job and knows how to do everything flawlessly. And then she simply looked at me and said, "Kirby, yeah, no, we all just fake it till we figure it out. To be completely honest, we all just fake it till we figure it out. To the point that she even admitted to me that she didn't even know that I was going to be your intern until the day she met me. She didn't even know she was going to have an intern. And she faked it until she figured out what I was going to do. And I didn't know that till she admitted that to me. So it's wild, but the idea that just because we get older, things like that, doesn't mean that you're gonna figure it out. Again, also even in our walk with God, just because we get older, we assume knowledge is gonna hit you, wisdom is gonna hit you. But if you're not actively trying to like get right with God, you're not just gonna get it. You know that's an work setting that can somehow bring back into our walk of God. But yeah, it's pretty much the wise thing I heard was fake it till you make it. Literally, just we're all just faking it.
Yep.
Mhm. Maybe this is cheating, but I'm gonna say that the wisest thing that has been said to me is all conversations that I've ever had with anybody, because every conversation that I have gives me an opportunity to learn something that I can apply to my life now, whether I'll realize it now or in the future or whenever. So it's almost like a cop out, but I guess if I wanted to pinpoint more, recently in the same Christian philosophy class, our professor keeps saying, always have your thinking caps on, no matter what you're doing, whether you're interacting with your friends or watching a movie or discussing like topics like this. And that's not to take away from the enjoyment of life and like letting yourself relax, but always stay critically thinking so that you can continue to learn from every single interaction you have, whether it's with yourself, with other people, or just in life in general. So,
Love that.
I guess the thing that I guess sticks out in my mind would be I was told I needed to find what would make me like happiest. Like I needed to like find what would make me happy. And I've kind of translated that into joy, because like happiness is kind of a fleeting emotion, and like you can be happy in moments, but you can be joyful like all the time. Like it's important to like carry joy with you. And it's, I guess, yeah, like finding, and I think that God gives us joy, like finding joy in every stage of your life, no matter what. I think that's probably one of the things that have stuck with me over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see that with like multiple people in the Bible of just like God, like saying like, they're like, oh, woe is me. And God's like, dude, like you got this, you got that, you got this. It's like, but I'm sick, Lord. Like, definitely.
I think one that's kind of stuck out to me, piece of advice that stuck with me was back in high school at my English teacher. Um, I was a bit behind when it comes to English academically because I didn't speak it very well in high school. But I remember also kind of like Kirby having a breakdown because I was talking to her how I felt like I wasn't gonna be able to get a bunch of assignments in because I had no idea what was going on and I didn't understand what she was saying and how much of a hard time I was having. And she just kind of put her hand on my shoulder and said, the fastest way to the finish line is doing it slowly and doing it right.
Mm.
And I don't know why, but that was like something that I remember forever.
That's a good one.
I love that.
Mhm.
So not just the fastest way, but it's the only way that you're assured to make it to the finish line. Because you could take a shortcut, right, and get to the finish line, but if you cheated, you could get that finish revoked. So the
Yeah.
only way to truly make sure that you can make it to the finish line is to take it slowly and do it right. And that doesn't mean that you might not make failures or mistakes, but that just means continue doing it to the best of your ability.
Mm-hmm.
Even then, it's the best way you're gonna retain information.
Yeah.
Just
Right.
actually taking your time. Because cheating, you're not learning anything. You just got out, you got away with it, you left, and you didn't get anything out of it.
Mm.
So for me, I love quotes. You guys know this. I like live my life via like verses and quotes. But there's like 3 specific quotes that I have like in my notes that I like look at like consistently that people have told me. And the first one is it's your direction, not intention, that gets you to your destination. Like that one, like I look up that all the time. It's like, so I'm going to repeat that. Like it's your direction, not your intention, that gets you to your destination. And for me, like this just basically just means that like a lot of people, especially like in like, oh, like I'm going to get into this, I'm going to start doing this. And they're like a lot of talkers. And I think we talk to ourselves a lot like, oh, I'm going to do this next year and like stuff like that. But how are you going to get to this place? Like, are you just going to start like today, tomorrow? Like in my head, I've always just like told myself, like, stop talking, like just do, like, because of that. Because a lot of times, like, we just constantly are just talking, like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. So like, that's like really stuck with me. And the second one is we have 2 jobs in life: to cope and to learn. And like, for me, that just helps me to accept pain more. So like I know that like basically in life, and some old woman from my church said this to me, and it was just so fun. Like at first I was like, why is she saying this? Like it's so random. Like she just literally like grabbed me and like sat me down and she's like, we have 2 jobs in this life: to cope and to learn. I was like, it's so weird, but it's but it's so true. Like in life, like we're constantly learning how we can be better, and in life we're constantly coping from like sad moments in our life. And I think like even from happy times, we're like learning from those happy times, like how did I get happy here? Like I want to be happy like this again. But also like we're all constantly coping with like trauma that we have in our lives that's like constantly coming back to us, or just like coping with just the fact of like how we deal with things, or just coping in some way or another. And the last quote that I literally say to myself like every day is we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And those 3 things have just always like really stuck with me. So but like the comfortable with being uncomfortable is just like, I guess is what we were talking about earlier with like being outside of our bubble and like being okay with being outside of our bubble.
The only place that change takes place in is in the middle. Because if you're at the finish, you're done changing. And if you're at the beginning, you haven't started changing. And the middle is where things are still going on and nothing is assured. So that's the only place that you're gonna grow. So something that is not necessarily stability guaranteed is the middle. And not saying that go out there, be risky and just kind of stupid, but understand that a scary situation will always give you something to learn from. So
Mhm. So I'm gonna hop back to our earlier conversation about the church. I think someone mentioned just like wisdom, like how we can be wise as like young people in the church. And we start talking about like, oh yeah, like getting experience, leadership, like listening and stuff like that. But in my experience, it doesn't matter how wise the kid is or anything, like adults just do not listen.
mm,
And it's kind of frustrating because it's like adults purely see if you don't have experience, then you do not have wisdom. I feel like that's the experience I've seen in the church. And it's frustrating because it's like, yeah, getting experience is part of wisdom. But when we really think about the wise people that we see in the Bible, like David, he was a child when he had so much wisdom
mm.
and stuff like that. So what do you guys think about like that?
Oh,
Vincent,
oh, go ahead, Kirby.
Who's going? Who's going?
Okay. Well, I was gonna say, um, part, and this is biblical. Like in Proverbs, it says part of being wise is listening. Um, and if somebody's not willing to listen, to even hear out and even consider that, then that's being unwise, in my opinion. So, uh, listening doesn't just mean to somebody who's on your equal footing with you necessarily. Like, oh, we're both leader positions in this church or in this company. I will only listen to somebody who's on the same level as me. That's not right. So, it's not wise. So, yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah.
how do we
So,
deal with that?
How do we deal with that?
yeah. So like basically, yeah, age does not equal wisdom, which I feel like a lot of people feel that way. Like they're like, I'm old, you have to listen to me because I am now wise. But Kirby, what were you gonna say earlier?
So what I was gonna say, if I can get it back in my brain. Oh yeah, no, it's funny, especially when church leaders especially try to figure out, oh, what can we do for the youth? How can we get something for the youth or figure out some information for the youth? But then don't go to the youth for those answers because they're like, well, we know everything, so we can just figure it out on our own. They kind of just you get someone to be their yes man for their idea instead of like criticizing why something's bad or something's good and then just kind of run with their own choice. Like I know for years my own church had its own issues with trying to figure out something with the youth, but then never actually asked the youth. And they finally figured out to just ask them, and now I've gone back and things are actually changing better for the youth to be in some involvement. But I think a lot of times it's just whoever thinks they know the most will think they know the most, even if it's ironically something that you should ask younger people about. And it's just, dude, it's kind of dumb. But yeah, that's pretty much what I have on that.
The verse that I think was, I don't know, it was brought up earlier. But the verse that says, "Don't let anyone look down on you because you're young." I think if I remember correctly, that's Paul talking to Timothy. And it's interesting because like he's kind of giving that responsibility to Timothy, because if the older people aren't willing to listen, then it's up to the younger person to like either make them listen or just go do whatever they need to do on their own. I don't know, there's not an easy solution to like, you know, you can't make someone listen to you, you can't make someone respect you, but you can let them either stop you and make you give up, or you can not let them do that and just keep doing what like you know that you have learned and what God is telling you to do. So I think in that type of a situation, it's kind of like the ball is in your court.
Mm-hmm. And it's frustrating though, because a lot of people our age we see like are giving up more than fighting for themselves, which is unfortunate.
It's easier, you know, because a lot of times you'll see people trying to start doing things on their own and it'll get interrupted by somebody who thinks they have the right to tell them, oh, you can't do this, you don't have enough experience, or oh, you can't do this, this is outside of the conference or something, you know. But yeah, I guess if you're truly pushing on for what you believe is a good thing and a right thing, there will be difficulties, but God will see it through in the end. So you just kind of got to trust, back to the faith and trust. Yeah, it's not easy, but it's also like if you look at it, one day we'll be the people put into positions of leadership within the church, within our jobs in some aspects. So at some point, we'll be the people responsible for creating that change, whether that be now or later. So we need to make sure that we don't lose sight of the things that we're critiquing right now, and always make small movements to put those things in action, whether it be in our mindsets and the way we act and talk, or later on when we're in positions of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's a very good point, Delano, and it kind of goes back to a point I made a lot, like in the beginning, which was like about being open. And I think a better word for that now is humility, because, like you said, for those who come back or stick to being in the church, I guess, despite not being listened to, because in my I wouldn't say my experience, but in my, I guess, friends' experience is more like they just reach an impasse where they start to be rejected, I guess, because of their lack of wisdom, in a sense.
Like a,
It is our job to be to be humble in the sense of being understanding, because God can speak through anybody and through any vessel and use any vessel. And sometimes it's the most unlikely. And it's been many examples through the Bible. Doesn't mean that it's all the time like that, but and it will become our job at one point to, like you said, be in that position. And then in that sense, we would be the ones with the most wisdom or experience. And a lot of times it's how you treat others around you. And sometimes it can, despite you having a lot of wisdom or knowledge to share, you will make the other person receptive because you are creating an impasse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
stay vigilant.
I think that kind of ties back in with being willing to go out of your comfort zone and like putting yourself in a position for yourself to be able to make a difference, even if you don't feel ready. Like it ties back in with the fake it till you make it concept, and like the concept of just like living life out of your comfort zone. There's a Facing the Giants, that really popular Christian movie. There's a part in that movie where someone says that the football coach should prepare for God to move. He says, you should prepare for rain. I think he like referred to some story in the Bible where God told the people to prepare for rain, and they like got everything ready. They planted all their crops and everything, even though it was like a famine, and it didn't make any sense. But they put themselves in the position for God to move, and then God came through. And so, as a young person, do the scary thing, even if nobody's listening to you, even if you don't feel like you've been given a platform. Like, go find that for yourself, and stay in tune with what God is telling you, and prepare for him to work through you. And that doesn't mean you won't make any mistakes. That doesn't mean you won't get embarrassed potentially. That doesn't mean people will always receive you well. But if you're fully putting your trust in God, then he's going to do something with that. He's going to do something with that offering that you've given.
At that point, God has already put you in a leadership position, a leadership into making a change for something that is lacking. So if you are feeling called to make that change, then trust that God will give you guidance.
Yeah. All right. I feel like we have like a pretty good stopping point at this point. We talked about like that, and just like a recap, we talked about the idea of wisdom. We we like what a wisdom is, getting experience, leadership, knowing when to listen, being receptive, and like being, and we kind of added later on, like overall just being humble, and like why we need wisdom, like what people have said to us that are wise. I feel like the name of this like podcast should be like bark less, listen more. Like, I don't know, I really like that one. Just like I feel like that like pretty much like sums up like what wisdom is. But yeah, this is fun.
That's a wrap.
Right. Bye.
Bye.
Till next
Goodbye.
time.
What was that?
That was good.
That was really cool.